I knew something was off when the CEO's admin called me ma'am in the hallway. That's not her style. She's a 27-year-old fireball who once threatened to stage a walkout over bad coffee filters. But that morning, she looked at me like I'd already died. Like I was some tragic pioneer woman wandering the open plan office in ghost form, clutching my outdated folder system like a damn prairie bonnet. See, I'd spent 11 years at Venture Analytics building the bones no one saw. Not the fancy slide decks, not the buzzy Slack channels, not the breathy think pieces our marketing guy posted on LinkedIn like he was curing cancer. I'm talking about the real skeleton, the vendor audit trails, compliance workflows, back-end handshakes, and the onboarding matrix so precise you could train a monkey on it and still pass ISO review. They called me Operations Specialist Roman II, which in English translates to woman who makes sure the entire place doesn't fall into a flaming sinkhole while the boys play agile tag and toss buzzwords like croutons. I never asked for attention. I didn't network. I didn't schmooze. I stayed late, fixed messes, and kept my mouth shut when managers took credit for things I built. I was the kind of worker you never notice until your server room catches fire, and suddenly you're weeping into your quarterlies. And the thing is, I didn't mind, at least not at first. But somewhere between year 9 and we're piloting a digital wellness initiative, I started noticing something. The men got promotions for PowerPoints I made. My junior analyst got a company-wide shout-out for the dashboard I custom-coded after hours. And me. I got ghosted in calendar invites. I got looped in later like I was a barnacle on the side of the org chart. Then came the whisper. Acquisition. Big, 7 figures, maybe more. A tech conglomerate with deep pockets and no patience for sketchy compliance trails. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. The CFO knocked on my door and used the phrase mission critical. Legal dropped off an NDA thicker than a wedding cake and asked me to compile a full continuity brief, everything from integration sign-offs to proprietary workflows. They called it a light ask. I called it 8 years of my life in spreadsheet form. It felt good, for a moment, like they finally saw me. Not thanked me, not respected me, let's not go crazy, but noticed. And I would have done it anyway. Because even when the building forgets your name, you still want it to stand. I burned through nights building the brief, auditing systems, fixing quiet errors I didn't cause. By the time I finished, the damn thing could have passed a federal inquest. I even tucked in a continuity clause, buried but binding, that required my final certification for the deal to close. Not for ego, for integrity. They just didn't read the fine print. It's funny, isn't it? How often we underestimate the people keeping us afloat. And listen, since you're already 5 paragraphs in, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button and maybe toss a like while you're at it. 90% of you don't, and it really helps the team. Helps me keep telling stories like this one, ones that matter in the places no one looks. Anyway, back to the part where the iceberg hits. The continuity brief circulated quietly. Legal thanked me. CFO promised to loop back. Then suddenly, the lights dimmed. My calendar invites dried up. The meetings I was always in gone. No explanation, no handoff. It was like someone had quietly pushed delete on my career but forgot to tell IT. Then came the daughter. Ava, fresh out of somewhere expensive, armed with a smile that could sterilize a cactus and a job title that meant absolutely nothing. Chief Talent Officer, which apparently involved firing anyone who remembered when the company ran on actual work instead of mood boards and espresso shots. She scheduled something called a culture recalibration town hall. People showed up thinking there'd be snacks. Instead, we got a lecture on modern workflows, emotional clarity, and unclogging the pipeline of stagnation. And when someone asked what that meant in English, she looked straight at me and said, "Some people still use folders." I laugh caught in my throat, not because it hurt, but because I made those folders. The ones that kept her daddy's company from drowning in fines, the ones legal built the acquisition packet around, the ones with my initials on the bottom of every verified page. So I smiled, went back to my desk, and quietly forwarded the continuity brief to legal again. This time with the timestamp and the subject line, confidential, for audit trail use only. Because if you're going to erase a legacy, you better be damn sure it doesn't have a backup. Ava arrived like a splash of perfume you didn't ask for, loud, lingering, and liable to make someone break out in hives. Nobody said the word nepotism out loud, but it hung in the air like printer toner and broken promises. She introduced herself by asking, "Who here loves change?" And when only the interns raised their hands, she clapped like we were contestants on some reality show and said, "Exactly. We're gonna shake things up." Within a week, there was a mandatory calendar invite called Reimagining Team Synergy, which turned out to be 30 minutes of buzzwords and a trust fall exercise that ended with the QA lead nearly breaking a hip. I watched from the back of the conference room as Ava sketched out her vision for growth on a whiteboard she couldn't figure out how to erase. She said the word disruption 6 times, each with more glitter in her eyes than the last. She wasn't dumb. Let me be clear about that. She was dangerous in the way that only confident mediocrity can be. The The kind of person who asks if the servers are cloud-based and then recommends switching to Google Sheets. She wanted to lead, but didn't know what was being led. And because she'd grown up in boardrooms, she thought eye contact was the same thing as credibility. She started with low-hanging fruit, contractors, old-timers, anyone who didn't speak in TikTok cadence. Then she moved to process changes. My onboarding tree deleted, my multi-vendor escalation ladder replaced by a Slack emoji flowchart. Then came the folders. We were in the middle of one of her recalibration town halls. Half the department was there, staring into their coffee like it held salvation. Ava was clicking through a slide deck called Evolving Work, Energy, Intuition, Disruption, when she suddenly froze the screen and pointed to a sample workflow. It was mine, literally mine, from the continuity brief. She'd grabbed it from the server and slapped a neon filter over it like that made it hers. Then she said it. Some people, Ava announced, are still clinging to outdated models, like physical folders. Can you believe that? People turned to look at me, not with malice, just with that dead-eyed office stare that says, "I'm so sorry it's you today." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just smiled like I was watching a toddler draw with a Sharpie on their dad's credit card. Later that afternoon, I returned to my desk, pulled up the draft continuity memo, and forwarded it again to legal. Same file, same warning. But this time, I added a line in the body, per Compliance Appendix C. Final systems certification must be signed by the continuity architect. Reminder, my certification remains pending. I flagged it confidential. I timestamped it with my initials. I even CC'd myself on a personal email I kept for emergencies. And then, like the ghost they were trying to make me, I disappeared back into the hum of corporate limbo. But here's the thing about people like Ava. They don't check the wiring before flipping the switch. She assumed my silence meant agreement. She mistook quiet for weakness. She thought she was steamrolling Deadwood, when what she really did was kick the main breaker to the deal her daddy had spent a year massaging into existence. And me? I kept doing my job, quietly, meticulously, like a spider rebuilding its web after some frat bro stomped through the garage. Ava sent out a new policy update the next morning. She called it Project Fresh Blood, a 5-point plan to infuse the team with a modern mindset. Number 3 on the list was, I kid you not, end legacy practices that slow workflow. I almost choked on my gas station granola bar. Because somewhere between step 3 and her next Instagram story, she forgot the oldest rule in the playbook: don't cut what you don't understand, especially if it's holding up the ceiling. It happened on a Tuesday, which tracks, most executions do. Tuesdays are mean like that. They don't give you the mercy of a Monday warning or the courtesy of a Friday fade out. Just a sharp, unexpected middle finger in the middle of your week. I walked into what I thought was a regular sync-up with ops and legal. I even brought my notes. I still had ink on my fingers when it happened. The chairs were already arranged in a semicircle, like a game show panel. Ava sat at the head of the room with a non-fat oat latte like she was judging a startup pitch. Beside her was Craig from HR, clutching his tablet like a Bible he hadn't read. I nodded a polite good morning. No one nodded back. I knew, not all of it, but enough. You can smell blood before you see the knife. Let's jump in, Ava chirped, smiling too wide. This is going to be short. She opened a PowerPoint called Talent Optimization Restructure. No agenda. No handout, just vibes and bullets. Then she turned to me. Mary, she said brightly, thank you for coming. As you know, we're realigning around velocity and modern impact. And unfortunately, a pause, a blink, a flash of teeth, we don't need lazy people slowing us down. Just like that, like I was a typo. Like 11 years of doing the work no one else understood could be erased with a sentence designed to get applause on LinkedIn. The room fell silent, not tense, not shocked, just heavy, like everyone realized they were extras in someone else's play and the lead actress had just gone off script. Craig cleared his throat and tapped something on his screen. I didn't even glance at the document. I knew what it was. Probably predated by a few days to make it look procedural. No performance review. No incident report. Just effective immediately. I should have cried, maybe, protested. I could have brought up the continuity clause, the audit packet, the contract. Hell, I could have shown them the buyer's checklist that still had my name in bold under Key Systems Custodian. But I didn't. Instead, I stood, smoothly, quietly. I reached into my desk drawer for my USB, the same one I'd used for 8 years, back up to the backup, and slid it into my purse. Your badge? Ava prompted. I looked at her like she was a smudge on my screen and placed the badge gently on the table. Good luck, I said. No sarcasm, no venom, just that. Good luck. I walked past Craig, past the intern who once cried in my office because he accidentally deleted a client folder and I stayed until 10 p.m. to help him fix it. Past the marketing lead who once asked me how to encrypt PDF contracts because she didn't trust IT. No one looked me in the... That was the worst part, not the insult, not the dismissal, but the erasure. The quiet way people distance themselves from someone falling through corporate ice. I got into the elevator and let it close behind me like a coffin lid. My palms were damp, my breath shallow. There was a ringing in my ears, not rage, not even humiliation, just emptiness. And then it stopped. By the time I hit the lobby, the shame had burned off like fog in sunlight. I realized something in that moment, standing under flickering LEDs beside a ficus plant that hadn't been watered since Q2. They didn't fire me because I was lazy. They fired me because they didn't know what I did. And when you don't understand something, you either worship it or you destroy it. I walked to my car without checking my phone. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just drove home, made a sandwich, and opened my laptop. Then I plugged in the USB and opened the master continuity file. Everything was still there. Every protocol, every digital paper trail, every system integration I'd mapped by hand. And at the bottom of the acquisition packet, buried under the compliance writers and legal footnotes, was one beautiful line in 10-point font. Final operational validation and audit completion must be certified and signed by the designated continuity architect, M. Halloway. That was me, still me, and they had just cut the wire without checking if the bomb had a second trigger. The first email came before I'd even finished my coffee the next morning. Subject line, exit interview follow-up, please respond. The body was a passive-aggressive haiku of HR nonsense, asking for constructive reflections on my transition. Constructive? Sure, but only if I was allowed to set the building on fire and write my feedback in the smoke. I didn't respond. The second was from Craig, HR's hollow-eyed henchman, asking if I had any remaining company property to return. I stared at the screen, took a slow sip, and gently closed the laptop like it was leaking radiation. Then the calls started. Unknown numbers, blocked IDs, one from the general company line. I watched them all ring out, one by one, as I folded laundry and let my cat knead a hole in my sweater. Every time the phone buzzed, it was like a gnat whining against a window, insistent but ultimately powerless. They weren't worried yet, not really. They were checking boxes, making sure I wouldn't sue, hoping I'd go gently into that good LinkedIn post about embracing new opportunities. What they didn't know, what Ava couldn't know, is that by firing me without cause, without even reading the deal I'd spent months building around my name, they hadn't severed a head. They'd cut the oxygen to their own merger. I pulled up the continuity brief again, this time not out of habit but with intent. Clause 6.7c, buried deep in Appendix D, the part even legal skimmed. Final audit review and operational continuity sign-off must be provided by the appointed key systems custodian. This sign-off is non-transferable and must be personally certified by M. Halloway. My name, my title, my role, non-transferable. They couldn't substitute it, fake it, or hope it vanished in a sea of other signatures. I was the failsafe, the human checksum in their billion-dollar algorithm, and Ava had walked me out like expired yogurt. I read the line 3 times, then sat back and let it settle in my bones like whiskey. I wasn't just essential. I was irreplaceable, not metaphorically, legally, structurally, architecturally, but I didn't call. I didn't forward the clause, didn't send a gentle oops nudge to remind them what they'd done. Instead, I watched. From the outside, the first ripple came from a LinkedIn post Ava made that week. A picture of her on the company rooftop, holding a mug with the caption, "Real leaders make hard choices. Proud to have cleaned house and made space for new voices. Let's go rocket fire #leadership #observolution." I laughed so hard I dropped my toast. Cleaned house, huh? She didn't know it yet, but she just bleach-bombed the command center. Soon, I started hearing things through the grapevine. A Slack message screenshot here, a whispered signal ping there. People asking questions about system integrity. Where were the vendor audits? Why was the onboarding matrix outdated? Why weren't the integration logs syncing anymore? Ava, apparently, told them I never documented my work properly. Old claim for someone who didn't know the difference between a Gantt chart and a grilled cheese. The buyer's team had entered the due diligence phase. That meant checking workflows, reviewing audit logs, validating data trails. Basically pulling back the curtain I'd kept spotless for a decade. And what did they find? Gaps, files that didn't match, processes that couldn't be explained, links that led to nowhere, because I hadn't left behind a mess. I'd taken the glue. The next email came from legal. This one had weight. Subject line, request for clarification systems certification. The body was short, polite, and vaguely panicked. They asked if I would be willing to consult on minor clarification regarding continuity documentation. I didn't reply. They followed up. I still didn't reply. Radio silence is a language, and right now I was speaking it fluently. Because here's the thing. When someone smears your name with the word lazy, the instinct is to scream your value, prove your worth, shove the receipts in their face. But real power is watching the train leave the station, without the conductor, and knowing exactly where the brakes were supposed to be. They found the gap on a Thursday afternoon. Fitting, really, since Thursdays are the day of reckoning in corporate time. Far enough from Monday to think you're in control, close enough to Friday to realize you're not. The buyer's team, a group of beige-shirted sharks from some faceless consulting firm, had been combing through the due diligence docs with the enthusiasm of IRS agents on caffeine. And then they hit it. A version mismatch in the back-end integration matrix. Simple enough at first glance. A timestamp that didn't align, a cross-vendor handshake missing a required token. but it triggered a deeper scan. On that surfaced a list of validation steps, all of which led to a name. Mine. Suddenly, phones started ringing. Legal pinged operations. Operations looped in compliance. Compliance dragged in Ava, who was halfway through a team gratitude circle in the break room when the call came through. I imagine she took the Bluetooth headset off with a sigh, already rehearsing her dismissive laugh. But this wasn't just a naming convention problem. This wasn't a let's push the patch fix. This was foundational. The buyer's team wanted to know who validated the system integrations, who signed off on the platform migrations, who attested to the audit continuity protocols. And the answers? They weren't in the Jira tickets. They weren't in the new float charts. They weren't in the Notion dashboards Ava had glued her name all over, because I didn't log my work in places that could be overwritten. I logged them in versioned, encrypted files, time-stamped, signed, double-authenticated. Everything pointed to one role, continuity architect, and that role pointed to one name, M. Halloway. Ava apparently tried to play it cool, shrugged, made some quip about, oh, she was our tech girl, she quit before I got here, like I was an unpaid intern who wandered off after lunch. She even tossed out a guess that maybe Craig or one of the analysts had access to those systems now. But then one of the lawyers, not internal, from the acquiring firm, opened the compliance appendix and read aloud a line that had been copy-pasted into over 24 contract attachments, each one legally binding. Final operational sign-off required from continuity architect M. Halloway. Certification non-transferable. Execution required prior to acquisition approval. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped. This wasn't just a signature. This was a legal requirement. No signature. No sign-off, no sale. Craig reportedly blinked like a man who'd just realized he'd been holding a live grenade for 3 days. Ava, from what I was told, went quiet. Not defensive, not angry, quiet. Because even in her delusional little kingdom of recycled buzzwords and Instagrammable leadership quotes, she understood one thing: money talks. And it had just asked a question she couldn't answer. They scrambled to find a workaround. The role be reassigned? Could the cert be issued retroactively? Could they scrub my name from the file and plug in someone else? Compliance said no. Legal said absolutely not. The buyer's counsel said, and I quote, "We don't play liability roulette." Internally, panic crept in like a gas leak. Ava started floating apologies in disguise. Hey, just checking in, hope you're doing well. Emails sent to my old work address that now bounced back with a delivery failure. She asked someone in finance if I'd maybe left any instructions or possibly saved drafts in shared folders, as if I'd leave breadcrumbs after being shoved out the door like old inventory. One junior engineer, bless him, actually suggested they look in the old laptop backups. That's when someone finally admitted. The machine had already been wiped and reassigned to a junior sales analyst who used it to make PowerPoint templates. By the end of the day, whispers were swirling. The buyer's team paused progression. They requested clarification. Ava was told to prepare a timeline of my employment and responsibilities. A full timeline, with deliverables, with outcomes, with proof, and that's when she panicked. Because despite her curated aura of control, Ava had never once considered the possibility that I was more than just a middle-aged speed bump in her influencer journey. She thought she was kicking out clutter. Dead weight. A legacy dinosaur still using folders in the cloud age. But she hadn't cut fat. She'd severed the spine. And the worst part? She didn't even know how to spell what I did, let alone replicate it. Meanwhile, I was sitting at my kitchen table, peeling a grapefruit, watching a crime doc on Netflix, and reading through a short but growing list of voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. Craig asking for a quick clarification, someone from compliance requesting a callback, Ava leaving a message that began with, "Hi, Mary. I just wanted to apologize if things were miscommunicated." I let them pile up. I had already played my role, written the lines, built the set, and now I was just letting the scene play out. It finally reached the CEO like all corporate catastrophes do, too late, too loud, and wrapped in the greasy panic of someone trying to act like they're still in control. I imagine he was mid-swing on the company golf simulator when legal knocked. He probably waved them off with a later until he caught the look on their faces, white-knuckled, lips thin, eyes glassy with the dawning realization that someone had left the back door open during a hurricane. The meeting was moved up. No slides, no coffee, no team alignment platitudes, just paper, and a very specific clause that refused to go away. The CEO read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, like the words might change if he glared hard enough. Final operational sign-off required from continuity architect M. Halloway. Certification non-transferable. Execution required prior to acquisition approval. His jaw flexed the way it did when finance tried to argue budget lines. He looked at the general counsel. She nodded, not emphatically, just enough to say, "Yes, it's real. No, we can't fix it." Ava was called in 5 minutes later. She waltzed in with that curated grin she used for investor photo ops, phone still in hand like she was too busy with important things to sit down. But the room didn't play along. Nobody laughed. Nobody even looked at her. She slowed, that smile faltered. Just a hair, enough for those of us who know masks to see the crack form. The CEO didn't speak right away. Instead, he motioned to legal. The firm's outside counsel. Some guy named Ben with a tie 2 inches too short cleared his throat and began reading the clause. Out loud, no drama, just precision, like a surgeon naming organs as he removed them. Ava blinked. Wait, what is this? The lawyer didn't stop. She interrupted. Sorry, but I thought we already signed off on compliance. Craig said the tech stuff was cleared. The lawyer continued reading. Ava looked to her father. Dad, we already moved forward. She quit. She wasn't even a manager. Still, no one interrupted Ben. When he finished, he set the paper down like it was radioactive. Silence. Then the CEO asked one question, low and slow. Did you know about this clause? Ava hesitated. No one mentioned her in the deal packet. I thought she just handled admin. That word admin was the wrong card to play. The CEO turned to legal. And this clause, what happens if we can't get her signature? Ben didn't sugarcoat it. Buyer's team is stalling. They won't proceed without the full cert. If she doesn't sign, the deal's invalid. Another silence. A longer one. I wasn't there, but I know that kind of silence. It swells, it creeps. It makes grown men check their pulse and junior staffers reevaluate their careers. Ava suddenly softer. Can't we just reassign the role? Legal, no. Clause 6.7c states it's non-transferable. She was the only authorized signatory. Was part of the buyer's precondition for liability assurance. Translation, they trusted me, not the company. Ava crossed her arms. Okay, but why didn't anyone tell me? Ben didn't look up from his folder. It was in the appendix, right below the cybersecurity escalation matrix. Page 214. The room stirred. The CFO let out a breath like he'd been underwater. The head of ops shifted in her chair. And the CEO, well, I'm told he didn't yell. He didn't sigh. He just stared at his daughter for a long, long moment, like he was seeing her for the very first time without the filter of birthdays and inheritance. No one said it, but everyone heard it. You just blew the deal. Ava didn't speak again, not that day. She sat down, quietly, finally, and stared at the table like it might split open and swallow her whole. Across town, I reheated leftover spaghetti, checked my plants, and scrolled through the news. My name wasn't mentioned, of course. It never was, but I could feel it. The heat had finally reached the boardroom. The boardroom was too cold. That kind of forced-air chill that feels like punishment, a corporate meat locker lined with egos in tailored wool. Half the board was already seated, sipping mineral water and pretending not to scroll their phones. The other half trickled in with forced grins and whispered complaints about parking validation. No one knew what this emergency session was about, but the tension had teeth. Then legal arrived. 3 of them, suits sharp enough to open mail, eyes bloodshot from too many late nights revisiting a deal they thought was bulletproof. The CEO was already there, seated at the head of the table, face unreadable. Not angry, not calm, just still. Like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew was bad. Ava slipped in 2 minutes late, still carrying her phone, still dressed for LinkedIn photos rather than war. Her expression said confident. Her body language screamed, please let this be nothing. It wasn't nothing. The firm's lead counsel, a man named Hal who usually kept his voice flat and his posture theatrical, walked to the head of the table and placed a single document in front of the CEO. Not a binder, not a deck, 1 page, that's all it took. We have a problem, Hal said. Everyone stopped. Even the CFO, never paused mid-email. The CEO didn't move, just lowered his gaze to the paper. The room held its breath. He read aloud slowly like each word was made of lead, continuity architect, signature required for operational finalization. He looked up, not at legal, not at the board, at Ava. His jaw tightened, not in rage, in restraint. The way you clench when you know shouting would only make the wreckage echo louder. What did you do? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ava blinked. I thought that was handled. Craig said she'd already quit. No one told me she was important. She wrote the clause, Hal said. She built the systems that clause protects. Her signature isn't ceremonial, it's contractual. The buyer made it a condition of acquisition. They trusted her name, not our logo. Ava looked down at her phone like it might vibrate with salvation. It didn't. The CFO spoke next. Carefully, we assumed continuity could be reassigned, that she was replaceable. Hal flipped the contract to another section, tapping his finger. Non-transferable, explicit language, page 214. She listed herself by legal name and title, M. Halloway, Continuity Architect, and the buyer countersigned that section. It's binding. A new kind of silence crept in. Not shock, not fury. Realization. The kind that lands slow and awful, like a balloon filled with wet cement. One board member, a woman from Risk, I think, leaned in and muttered, she's not picking up, is she? The CEO shook his head. No. Ava was staring at the table now. Hands clasped so tightly her knuckles went pale. She's doing this on purpose, she whispered. No, Hal corrected gently. She's doing nothing, that's the problem. She hasn't obstructed anything. She hasn't leaked. She hasn't threatened. She just walked away. Another voice from the back. Can we offer her something? A consultant role? We already tried, the CFO said grimly. Through back channels, she didn't respond. The board began murmuring. Someone asked about delaying the close. Someone else mumbled about fiduciary exposure. I saw a hand reach for a water glass, shaking just slightly. All around Ava, the walls were closing in, not with screams, not with accusations, but with soft, bureaucratic terror. The kind of doom that comes stapled to an NDA and sealed with investor signatures. And still, the CEO stared at his daughter. She was the architect, he said, not bitter, not loud, just stunned. You tore down the house and never thought to check who poured the foundation. Ava didn't reply. She couldn't. Because for the first time since she stepped into that office with her vision boards and curated jargon, she realized something no MBA program teaches. Real power doesn't introduce itself. It signs at the bottom of the page, or doesn't. By Friday morning, the deal was on ice. Not paused, not in review, on ice. Frozen like an unpaid server bill, quiet, inconvenient, and damning if left too long. The buyer's team issued a formal notice of delay, citing incomplete continuity certification. Just 6 words. They hit like a freight train. This deal is legally unclosable without Mary Halloway. Suddenly, inboxes were volcanic. Compliance blamed HR blamed legal. Legal blamed unclear documentation, which is lawyer code for someone is going to get sued if we name names. The CFO stopped showing up to internal syncs and started calling in from his lake house. And Ava was silent for a minute. Then she got creative. The first message came through my old Gmail, the one I used back when I was freelancing during grad school. She must have dug it out of some dusty onboarding form, buried under years of policy updates and forgotten birthday cards. Subject, just wanted to connect. The body? Hey Mary, hope you're well. No pressure at all, but if you're open to a quick call or coffee, I'd love to clear the air and maybe revisit how we left things. I think there's a real opportunity for collaboration moving forward. Warmly, Ava. She signed it warmly. I deleted it. She tried again the next day, this time through a mutual connection on LinkedIn, one of those smiley interns she'd once called low energy. I assumed she thought I'd be flattered or nostalgic. She even had them ask if I was open to contracting. I wasn't. Then came the CEO himself. This time, it was direct. My personal phone buzzed at 6:42 a.m. with a voicemail from an unknown number. I didn't answer, of course, but I listened. Mary, he began, voice stiff but composed. This is Alan. I know we've had our differences. I want to acknowledge that what happened wasn't handled well. I was unaware of your role in the continuity structure. That's not an excuse, it's an admission. I take full responsibility for the oversight. That said, I believe we can find a way forward. If you're willing, I'd like to discuss terms for reinstatement. Quietly, of course. No paperwork, just a clean slate, perhaps even an advisory role. Let's fix this. No paperwork, quiet, a clean slate. Translation, come back, sign the paper, and vanish before anyone notices how badly we botched this. I replayed the message once, then twice. Then I made tea, and I let it sit. They thought I wanted revenge. I didn't, not really. I didn't want money. Or groveling apologies, or Ava's carefully bleached scalp on a platter. I just wanted the truth to live in the light for once. I wanted the silence to speak louder than any resignation email, or I gave this company everything speech. So I did the most powerful thing a woman like me could do in a world that expects us to apologize for our value. Nothing. I didn't call back. I didn't reply. I didn't leak the clause or talk to press or air grievances on social media. I let their own paperwork rot in their inbox. I let the deal sit untouched, cold, inert, waiting for a name they could no longer summon. One day passed, then another. By Tuesday, whispers turned to full-on strategy meetings. They brought in outside consultants to explore options. But they already knew the truth, there were none. They had stripped out the soul of their systems, called her lazy, and fired her in front of a room full of people too scared to blink. And now they were learning what happens when the architect stops showing up. Not with a bang, with a silence so complete it echoed. I sat in my garden that evening, wind rustling the dead lavender I kept meaning to pull. My phone buzzed once more, no name, just unknown caller. I let it ring. I knew what they wanted, and for once I didn't owe them anything. It happened exactly 1 week later. In an office with better coffee, better lighting, and not a single framed poster about team synergy in sight. The acquiring firm, Monada Group, reached out through a real channel this time. Not an intern, not a middle manager. A senior executive with an actual understanding of infrastructure risk and the soft power of people who prefer code to credit. Their email wasn't long. Just 6 lines. Miss Halloway, you've reviewed the continuity documentation and your role in its creation. We'd like to propose a formal engagement on your terms. Title, Systems Integrity Advisor. Compensation, competitive, flexible, fully remote if preferred. Start date at your discretion. No fluff, no fake flattery, just facts, and respect, something that had always been in short supply at Venturin. I responded the next day. They flew me in on Thursday, not on a red-eye, not squeezed between interns on a budget airline. Business class, a driver waiting. They even asked for dietary preferences like I was a human being instead of an office appliance. The meeting wasn't long. We shook hands, reviewed the terms, and signed. I brought a pen just for the occasion, black ink, smooth glide, the kind you use when you're writing the next chapter of your life and don't want the paper to fight back. I kept it brief. No stories, no revenge monologue. I already knew what I could do, that's why I was there. They handed me a welcome packet. I handed them a copy of the signed cert, completed, dated, and clean, and that was that. I walked out with a folder that actually meant something and a job offer that didn't feel like a muzzle. Back home, the sun had already started to set when the doorbell rang. A delivery guy stood there holding a florist's box the size of a legal briefcase. Crisp, white ribbon, fancy calligraphy on the card. I opened it slowly. Roses, pale peach, some kind of boutique nonsense probably curated by an algorithm with access to Ava's Pinterest board. The card read, "I hope we can start over someday. I'm sorry for how things ended." Warmly, Ava, there it was again. Warmly. As if we'd shared tea, not a public humiliation and a multi-million-dollar implosion. I walked to the kitchen trash, pressed the pedal, and dropped the bouquet in. No drama, no cinematic slow-mo. Just the soft crinkle of overpriced apology petals meeting yesterday's coffee grounds, because the truth was simple, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to teach a lesson or extract revenge. That's what people like Ava never understood. They think silence is rage. They think calm is weakness. They think a woman only has value when she's fighting for space at their table. But I didn't want their table. I built my own. One clause, one signature, one quiet decision at a time. And as I watched the trash lid close over that velvet box, I heard my own voice echo in my head, steady, clean, unshaken. Lazy people don't get to design your exit route. I set down the lid, poured myself a drink, and opened the welcome packet from Minata. New role, new rules, and this time, all mine. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.